You replay the conversation for the 10th time. You imagine every way the meeting could go wrong before it even starts. You lie in bed at 1 a.m. rewriting a text message you already sent hours ago. Your body is still, but your mind is running laps around the same track, over and over, going nowhere. You call this thinking things through. It isn't. It's overthinking, and it has quietly convinced you that it's protecting you, when really it's the thing draining you the most. You believe, somewhere deep down, that if you just think about a problem hard enough, for long enough, you'll eventually arrive at certainty. You'll finally know what they meant by that comment. You'll finally know how the interview will go. You'll finally know if you made the right choice. But you never arrive at that certainty, because most of what you're overthinking was never solvable through more thinking in the first place. You're not solving anything. You're just suffering the same problem repeatedly, in advance, for free. The Stoics understood this almost perfectly 2,000 years before modern psychology gave it a name. Epictetus, who was born a slave and later became one of the most influential philosophers in history, opened his entire teaching with a single distinction that could end most of your overthinking immediately if you actually applied it. He said some things are up to you, and some things are not up to you. Your opinions, your effort, your reactions, your choices, those are up to you. Other people's opinions of you, the outcome of an interview, what someone meant by a message, whether it rains tomorrow, none of that is up to you. And almost everything you overthink falls into the second category. You spend hours turning over things that were never yours to control in the first place. What they think of you, whether they'll text back, whether the decision you made 5 years ago was the right one. None of that shifts 1 inch no matter how many hours you spend circling it in your head. Epictetus would tell you, calmly, that you're wasting the one resource you actually do control, your attention, on the one category of things you never controlled to begin with. Here's why your brain does this anyway. Overthinking feels like productivity. It feels like you're doing something about the problem, even when you're just sitting there. Your brain evolved to treat uncertainty as a threat, and thinking about a threat repeatedly used to help your ancestors prepare for real, physical danger. But your brain can't tell the difference between an actual threat and an awkward text message. It treats both the same way, flooding you with the same anxious alertness, the same racing thoughts, the same inability to just let it go. Overthinking is your ancient threat detection system misfiring on modern, mostly harmless situations. Marcus Aurelius, sitting at the head of the Roman Empire with more real threats to worry about than you'll ever face, wrote himself a note that cut straight through this. He reminded himself that it's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about events. The event itself, someone leaving your message on read, is neutral. It's completely silent. It has no opinion about what it means. Your mind is the one supplying the story, the meaning, the danger. And once you notice that the anxiety is coming from your interpretation and not from the actual event, you can start questioning the interpretation instead of drowning in it. Try this the next time you catch yourself spiraling. Ask yourself what actually happened, in the most boring, factual way possible. Not, they're mad at me and probably talking about me right now. Just, they haven't replied yet. That's it. That's the entire neutral fact. Everything else, the story about anger, judgment, rejection, is something your mind built on top of the fact, and you can take it back down the same way you built it up. Overthinking also thrives on a trick called fortune-telling, where you convince yourself you already know how something will turn out, usually the worst possible version of it. You imagine the awkward silence before the conversation even happens. You imagine the rejection before you've even asked. And because your brain treats vivid imagination almost the same way it treats real memory, you start reacting emotionally to a future that hasn't happened and might never happen the way you're picturing it. Seneca warned about exactly this. He said that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that we often torment ourselves with fears completely detached from what actually happens. Most of what you dread will either not happen at all, or will happen in some completely different way than the version currently running through your head at full volume. Notice how much of your overthinking is actually just fear wearing the costume of preparation. You tell yourself you're being responsible, thinking it through, being careful. But there's a simple test to know the difference. Preparation ends in a decision or an action. Overthinking just loops. If you've been circling the same worry for the 5th time today without landing on anything new, you're not preparing anymore. You're just suffering on repeat. So what actually interrupts the loop? The first tool is the simplest one, and it's the Stoic dichotomy of control applied directly. When a thought hijacks you, ask one question. Is this something I can actually act on right now? If yes, take the smallest possible action, send the message, make the call, write the sentence, anything that moves you from thinking into doing. If no, if it's genuinely outside your control, you have to consciously hand it back, the way you'd set down something too heavy to keep carrying. You don't need a resolution to something you never had control over. You need permission to stop paying rent on it. The second tool is naming the thought instead of living inside it. When you notice you're spiraling, say to yourself, quietly, I'm having the thought that they're upset with me, instead of just, they're upset with me. That tiny shift in language creates distance between you and the thought. You go from being fused with the story to observing the story, and observation is the first step toward not being controlled by it. This isn't some modern therapy trick invented last decade. It's the same move the Stoics practiced constantly, treating your own impressions as things you examine rather than things you automatically believe. The third tool is time-boxing your worry. This sounds strange, but it works because your brain isn't actually trying to torment you forever, it's trying to get your attention. So give it an appointment. Tell yourself you'll think about this specific worry for exactly 10 minutes at 6 p.m., and if it shows up before then, you note it down and tell your brain, calmly, that it has an appointment later. Most of the time, by 6 p.m., the urgency has already faded on its own, because urgency, left alone, tends to burn itself out. The fourth tool is physical, not mental, and it matters more than people expect. Overthinking lives in your head, but it's fueled by your body's stress response. A racing mind is often sitting on top of a racing nervous system. Slow, deliberate breathing, especially a longer exhale than inhale, sends a direct signal to your body that you are not actually in danger right now. You can't always think your way out of a spiral, because the spiral isn't purely a thinking problem. Sometimes the fastest way out is through your breath, not your thoughts. And finally, there's a habit the Stoics return to constantly, which is journaling honestly at the end of the day, the way Seneca described reviewing his own day before sleep. Not to relive every worry, but to ask what's actually still unresolved, what was simply fear, and what you can let go of before tomorrow. This single habit, done consistently, trains your mind to stop treating every stray thought as an emergency requiring immediate, endless analysis. You are not broken because you overthink. You have a mind that's trying, clumsily, to protect you from uncertainty, using tools built for a very different kind of danger than the ones you actually face now. But you can teach it a better method. Notice what's actually in your control. Name the story instead of merging with it. Give your worries an appointment instead of unlimited access. Calm your body before you try to calm your mind. And review your day honestly instead of replaying it anxiously. The conversation you're replaying already happened. The version of tomorrow you keep rehearsing hasn't happened yet, and it almost certainly won't happen the way you're imagining it right now. Your mind doesn't need another hour of circling the same worry. It needs you to gently set it down, the way you'd finally put down something heavy you've been carrying far longer than you ever needed to.